Man, I love this silly little goober. I wonder what their backstory is. What? Trillions suffer a horrific death at the hands of incomprehensible lore. Call 777 BANANA to learn how you can help fight against this scourge. Hello lore boomblers, and welcome to the quest for the least comprehensible lore in gaming. I'm Banana Destroying Gaming, or BDG, and today I will possibly lose my sanity, but definitely figure out which lore is least understandable in all of gaming. After I destroyed every game other than the 6 I'm going to talk about. But to not understand something, you first need to get info dumped by your hyperfixated friend. However, I don't have the budget for a 56-hour info dump, and I'm not your friend. So instead, I will briefly summarize the lore of each game and then try to explain what makes them the perfect subject for an 8-hour video. And as a disclaimer, the summaries are going to be pretty basic, so that this video doesn't become so long that I will finish it at around the time of the heat death of the universe. So let's begin with a nice, easy game to summarize. Elden Ring, the latest game from Mental Anguish Factory FromSoft, who decided to ask some guy named Georg to write basically the entirety of the lore, which of course begins at the creation of the entire universe. Which was a pretty chill place, where the only thing in existence was this guy called Joe, who was really bad at Yu-Gi-Oh! And took it pretty personally when I absolutely destroyed him. So personally, he exploded into 8 extremely mentally ill gods. Like the Greater Will, who is an extreme control freak. If you accidentally cheat at a party board game with it, it will make it a big deal and ruin it for everyone. Then you have the opposite, the Frenzied Flame, which hates all rules. After it gets kicked out for trying to use banned cards at a tournament, it sets the entire venue on fire, since there can't be rules if nothing exists. Then we have the Formless Mother, who is a psychopath that thinks stabbing someone 14 times is a great icebreaker for a first date. Then you have the Scarlet Rot that wants immortality but in its own disgusting way, and disease, and growth and decay? So the evil fucked up version of Nurgle that has none of the good aspects and is red. Then you have the Dark Moon, which is going through a real rough time, and so it won't make it to your birthday party, but it will feel bad about it for 4 months. Then the Fell God is just an anarchist, who is actually pretty chill, just don't talk politics around it. Then you have the God of Death, and Birds, who is a disgruntled ex-employee, which is still upset about being fired, and it will make it your problem. And finally, the Bloodstar, who is a sociopath that goes out each day thinking what act of evil it will do. Now, as any good 0-second-old gods do, they immediately started fighting, and accidentally knocked over a water bottle on a plant pot, which created the lands between. Or rather, it created the Crucible, a stew best served warm that can feed about 4 to 5. And also create life, time, space, and that thing you put somewhere very specific that somehow disappeared. And so the Crucible started crucibling all over the place, basically doing the gods' job for them, creating the Shadowlands and lands between. The Greater Will saw this and colonized it just in time before the British got there. And to do so, it created the title of the game, which wasn't a real ring to avoid copyright infringement. Instead, it was basically a rulebook. And so after having penned the most annoying rulebook in all of existence, the Greater Will needed someone to enforce it. To that end, it picked the person most like itself it could find, Marika, an extremely mentally ill, psychopathic control freak. To aid Marika in her journey to kill 60% of the world, the Greater Will gifted her incredible powers and made her a god. Sadly, no one was there to tell her that with great power comes great responsibility. So she killed and destroyed most of the Shadowlands. Then she moved on to the lands between, and to make sure she could always have people to kill, she made death illegal and gave the document to her dog for safekeeping. Shortly after that, she realized that all this killing was making her pretty lonely. So she married Chad, the football player from high school who crashed out and became an alcoholic. As a honeymoon, they annihilated the giants, leaving only one survivor to suffer for their enjoyment. And the murdering went on for several more happy years. But then, she had pretty much done it. She killed 60% of the world. So she divorced Godfrey, taking his humanity in the divorce and kicking him out of the lands between because she thought it would be funny. But now Marika was looking for a new partner, but none were what she wanted, until she realized who the perfect partner for her was. Herself. So through either mitosis or whatever horrible things you can imagine, she did it, and Radagon, her literal other half, gave her many children, born with an Asberg seal of approval. The favorite being Godwyn the Golden, which I don't have a good image for because of spoiler reasons. By spoiler, I mean in like 30 seconds. The other less good children are Melania, who was born extremely diseased, which has absolutely no explanation whatsoever, and Mikola, the most like his mother, an absolute sociopath, which must have made her so proud. And then the other two, which were a bad omen, so they were kicked out. But they help show just how uncreative Marika is with the names of her children. The worst children got similar names, while the best got a unique one. Which reminds me, what is Godwyn up to? Oh, that's why there's no good image of him. It turns out that Rani the Witch wasn't a big fan of Marika and her Golden Order, so by distracting her dog with a treat, Rani stole part of the no-death law, letting her make a knife that actually kills you for real, and she used it to kill Godwyn. Marika took this very well. She only had a mental breakdown and destroyed the rules of reality, then went into hiding, letting her other self deal with the consequences of her actions. And now the Outer Will is calling on anyone to restore the Elden Ring, offering a $50 gift card to GameStop as compensation. That was a very compacted summary of Elden Ring, where I probably got some stuff wrong, and I definitely cut out a ton. That brings me to factor number 1 in what makes Elden Ring so hard to understand. Size. Martino wrote a lot of stuff about the general world, and then about the 6 trillion characters that both appear and don't appear. Then we get to the second reason why it's so incomprehensible. It is told to you through item descriptions, which only give a general hint towards a lot of the info, which means you need every single item out, which there are a lot of, forcing you to either collect them all or just go on a wiki and then become an archaeologist trying to piece all the information together. Or watch someone with a soothing voice explain it to you. But at least Elden Ring is set in a fantasy setting where you expect this kind of stuff. Imagine if instead of the lands between, it was set in New York City, or Washington, or a secret Siberian base where a telepathic billionaire is making an army of clones. Payday 2 is the game set in all of these ordinary, everyday locations, and it has an absolutely insane lore. But before the insanity, let's explain the basics. You play as a member of the Payday gang, a gang of thieves? I feel like the stuff they steal is less significant than the entire army's worth of police they kill. The leader of the gang is Bane, a man who is constantly high from dry ice smoke inhalation, and together, they stole enough to collapse the economy several times over. Following me thus far? Good, because none of that really matters. The actual story begins at some ambiguous point in the past, when giant godlike aliens land on Earth and create artifacts of magical power. And so, of course, a secret organization forms to keep them secret. The organization is led by 3 kings who are immortal? Oh shucks, the gang got betrayed, and now they will have to hunt down the one responsible. Okay, so the king doctor at some point goes a bit mad, probably from having to redo med school 200 times over, and he decides to use the magical ancient stuff to conquer the world. Are these goats from Goat Simulator? How quaint and jocular. So after the doctor tricks the gang into doing a bunch of stuff for him, he kidnaps Bane since he was catching on to the fact that Dentist was one of the kings. The gang then collects all the artifacts and go to break Bane out. But before they can get to him, oh wow, we're stealing Christmas. Truly an enrapturing and galvanizing situation. Bane kills the Doctor's Watcher, which is kind of like a guardian that makes a king nigh immortal while alive. Now with his back against the wall, the Doctor prepares to activate a reincarnation machine hidden underneath the White House to become the President of the United States. Oh, what? Then, after doing a hidden Easter egg, you come face to face with the doctor and you shoot him. Then all that remains is inserting gold into the machine and Bane is reincarnated as the president. The end. If it wasn't already extremely clear, there's a small gap between gameplay and story. Partially because it's a game that gets replayed over and over, and partially because who expects the silly heisting game to have this? You add on top of that the fact that this stuff is hard to figure out. You literally need to decode a made-up language to figure most of this stuff out. One of the best ways to tell if a lore is incomprehensible is how insane do you sound and look while explaining it. And on that scale, Kirby scores a solid, "What? How did you get in my house? What did you do to my family?" Just like any good confusing lore, the Kirby lore starts with a god. Well, it's less a god and more a universal vibe check, which upon receiving bad vibes, creates eldritch abominations hell-bent on consuming all reality. Upon receiving good vibes, it creates the same thing without the eldritch abomination part. Before Kirby was created, however, there existed two powerful ancient civilizations. Because they needed to cover all their bases, so they had the technological ancients and the magical ancients. Tech ones are probably humans from another dimension, so tick dimensional travel from your bingo sheet if you're playing along at home. The magical and technological ancients worked together to make many incredibly powerful artifacts that could be used for evil in a few centuries. Until some really bad vibes created Void Termina, a giant world eater that threatened the entire galaxy. The ancients hired Galactonite and 3 other unremarkable heroes to stop Void Termina, which they did. Turns out Galactonite is really strong. However, once victorious, he inspected his work contract to discover that not only was he not going to receive an overtime bonus, his payment was a $25 gift card to Burger King. And so he began rampaging, destroying all he came in contact with. The tech ancients panicked and tried to stand really still and hope he goes away, while the magical ancients, through great sacrifice, managed to seal him away in a big rock to be awakened as a secret boss. The tech ancients, seeing this, decided enough was enough, and they exiled the magical ancients for not doing their half of the chores. Oh, and because they sealed away the most powerful warrior in the galaxy, which was intimidating, I guess. The magical ancients took this very constructively and decided that they should plan revenge. However, it took so long to plan that by the time they were ready, the tech ancients weren't a thing anymore. But Kirby was. They were created from a big surge of positive emotion sometime after the exile of the magical ancients. Probably a long time, but we don't really know how long. And they went on many adventures, getting tricked into giving villains what they want and beating up DDD, yada yada. But how strong is Kirby? They're a being made of positive emotions who sleeps, eats, and is pretty cute. So obviously it's the most powerful being out of all of the games I'm gonna talk about. Kirby is indestructible, can survive in any environment, and with the actual power of friendship, has the ability to beat 2 gift-granting super machines and just about every eldritch god you can imagine. Goku, step aside. This pink marshmallow is way out of your league. And that was the Kirby lore, with most of the games cut out because they are usually just eldritch being gets killed by Kirby, which is definitely one of the reasons why it's so incomprehensible. Kirby is literally a mascot often put in the same category as Mario, who has pretty much the exact lore you would expect. Meanwhile, Kirby has eldritch gods, dimension-traveling civilizations, and a power level that makes Dragon Ball seem like a minor league boxing event. Combine that with games that have very little in the way of storytelling, and you get an extremely incomprehensible lore. But once you extrapolate it, it's not so bad. It's mainly carried by the surprise factor. I mean, could you imagine a game that tells its story this vaguely, but has Elden Ring amounts of lore? That would be crazy. Of course, when the topic of confusing lores is brought up, the first thing that comes to mind for most sane people is FNAF, which wasn't the first extremely confusing lore in gaming, but it was the first one people actually cared about. They cared enough that 3 full-on novels, 20 short stories, and 4 interactive novels were written to give more lore. which I am promptly going to mostly ignore to give you a basic summary. The story starts with William Afton. No, not him. Starting a restaurant with his good friend Henry. Now, there's a few things you should know about Afton. As a baby, he absorbed the essence of Grimace from McDonald's, which made him just like Grimace. Purple and a psychopathic killer. Now, alongside Henry, he created Fazbear's Family Diner, and for entertainment, they decided to invent incredibly advanced robotic technology, creating 2 suits, which can move around automatically or be worn for convenience, or in case they wanted to murder 5 children and needed a disguise to do it. The diner is very successful, so Henry and Afton decide to open up another branch, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and create new animatronics which are even more insanely technologically advanced, and somehow have enough space left over in their interiors to fit a child corpse compartment. Henry, meanwhile, was just now realizing that Afton wasn't all that great, so instead of doing anything responsible about it, he created a robot to protect his daughter, after Afton commented how easy to kill she probably was. But the joke was on him, because it was Afton's young child to be the first to die. Afton was conflicted after this. His murder machine worked, and a child died, which made him very happy, but his son was dead, which only made him slightly happy. And when Afton felt conflicted, he killed a child. And so he killed Henry's daughter, while the robot that was supposed to defend her got defeated by a doorstopper. Killing his friend's daughter was a nice appetizer for Afton, but to really scratch that child-killing itch, he used the murder suit to lead 5 kids away and killed all of them. He then used the child corpse compartment on the suits to hide the bodies. But it turns out if you're a kid who gets brutally murdered and then stuffed into an animatronic, you become immortal, kinda. Seeing this, Afton had yet another reason to kill kids. So he decided to create his own company to make even better murder machines. Then his stupid daughter triggered one of them and his whole scheme was ruined. So, to at least make sure all of his children suffered horribly, he sent his last son into the murder bot factory to die, or shut them off. Unfortunately for Mickey, neither happened. His inside organs were removed from him so that Ennard, a fusion of all the murder bots, could use him to escape and become a tired office worker. Unfortunately, not having bones, organs, and a good father leads to having your skin turn purple, which was so not Ennard's style. So it left, but hey, Mickey is still alive, in the empty flesh suit of a body. He somehow manages to walk without bones or organs, and presumably he just chills out like this for a couple of years. Because meanwhile, the other purple Afton was doing his weekly session of bullying children's souls, when his suit turned on murder mode and killed him. And after a few years, he is discovered. And just like those times that happened in real life, look it up, people assumed the corpse was made of wax or something, and used it to make a haunted house, which got burned down, probably by Henry. Unfortunately, he kinda sucked at burning things, so Afton survived. So while training his fire skills, Henry created a new Fazbear branch, because he had written up a really good speech and now wanted to have all of the animatronics as his audience. So with the help of Mickey, he gathered all of them and used his new fire skills to set the building on fire real good, killing all of them and freeing the souls of the children while condemning Afton to hell. Until he wasn't because money. That's right, he somehow uploaded his consciousness into code and then snuck into a VR game where he somehow entered the mind of a beta tester, using her to bring himself back to life to sell one last game where he burns to death at the end and definitely, for sure, dies until he won't. Now, told like I just did, it doesn't sound that bad, but trust me, many theorists sacrificed their sanities to get to this point, because the biggest reason why FNAF lore is so incomprehensible is that it's told extremely vaguely, hidden in every single detail, which means that everything needs to be analyzed just in case it has some meaning. The other problem is that sometimes those details are pretty significant, but they don't mean anything. Or they aren't even details, but they just get dropped. Or the story actually changes. By now, you probably noticed that I ordered the games per level of incomprehensibility. So you might be asking yourself, what could be more incomprehensible than FNAF? Well, let me introduce you to my hyper-obsession, Doom, the only lore that I don't need to watch a video about. Since I already made a video about the Doom lore, this summary is going to be even faster than the others to preserve my sanity, so if you haven't seen it, I will still give a basic rundown, no need to worry, until after the video is finished. Then you can start worrying. In the beginning, there was only Davoth, who created the first dimension, called soon-to-be Hell, and then he played Civ with the people of this world, helping them create a utopian society. Unfortunately, when he crushed one of them with a giant rock, they died, which was kinda cringe, but even though he was the creator of all reality, he couldn't fix this bug. So he created Urdak to do his job for him while he was creating all reality. One of the things he created was time, from which Urdak and soon-to-be Hell were excluded, which will be relevant later. Skipping past a brutal dictatorship, the people of Urdak, the makers, had managed to create immortality, but decided that Davoth hadn't showered ever, so he clearly didn't deserve it. So they sealed him away in a very soon-to-be Hell. Doing this angered Davoth enough to transform Jakard into Hell. While trying to break out, Davoth created rifts that demons used to escape. Seeing that they couldn't be cowards anymore, the makers attacked Davoth and managed to capture him in a love ball. But instead of sending him to the Pokemon farm far away, the father decided to keep him alive so he could ruin everything. The father had absorbed a lot of Davoth's power, and so he took his place and deleted him from the historical records. In an almost completely unrelated dimension, the events of Doom 1 through 64 lost levels occur, which are so unremarkable for the story that I am genuinely not even skipping that much. All you need from them is that the Doom guy, soon to be Slayer, is real good at killing demons and he is locked in hell, where he travels through dimensions and time to eventually arrive at the doorstep of the Argenta/Sentinel/humans? He gets adopted, and just as they were about to question him on the demons he talked about, hell invaded. Some guy named Sam then puts the Slayer inside a machine that injects Davoth's power in him, creating the Slayer, the most powerful being in the universe, which the maker immediately mind control. Then the events of Dark Ages happen and are never referenced again. Dark Ages occurs probably after the makers make an alliance with Hell for renewable energy. Torturing souls is renewable and has no carbon footprint after all. Then the makers betray the Sentinel and the Slayer, trapping them in Hell and putting the Slayer asleep. Nothing important happens in 2016. Then the makers are really stupid and decide to invade the one planet they know the Slayer cares about. So he kills God, then resurrects God 1.0, assembles the Avengers, and kills God to go back to his nap. Now, as I said, this summary is quite a bit faster and shorter than the others, partially because having to write different jokes is hard, and partially because if I go any longer, I will go on a 2-hour tangent. Now, what makes Doom lore so incomprehensible is pretty much the opposite of FNAF. Whereas in FNAF, you had to question everything to understand the lore at all, in Doom you need to take absolutely everything at face value. Otherwise, you will fall into a plot hole or incredibly weird connections/logic. The best way to describe the Doom lore is a thin line across a giant plot hole. Some of my favorite examples being the Praetor suit's function becoming very unclear after Doom 2016, since it was supposed to protect the Slayer, but he clearly doesn't need it. In general, Doom 2016 is very weird. While it's not entirely unexplainable, you can really tell that they didn't have a clue about any of the stuff to come when they made it. And my absolute favorite, so confusing it gave me a headache, how the hell does time even work? Which starts with the incomprehensible statement that Hell and Urdak are outside of time. Which is not true. Time proceeds linearly in them as well, but it doesn't stop there. How does anyone remember the Slayer or still hold a grudge against the makers? Millions of years have passed. And I say this because of you. Hebeth, the lost city on Mars, which is so deep under the surface, you need a gigantic gun to reveal part of it. We see it in Dark Ages, so to get that far down, so much time must have passed. I could go on, but you get the point. Combine that with lots of weird names and events, and it being told through collectible text files, and you get the second most incomprehensible lore in gaming. Because the first comes from a wide selection of games, but I'm only gonna pick one, Victoria 3. This universe's lore expects me to believe that a bunch of monkeys suddenly learned how to use sharp sticks or whatever. And then they learned how to cultivate crops to feed themselves, which is just ridiculous. Who in their right mind would eat this? And then they organized themselves in hierarchical societies, one of the first being called Sumar or whatever, and then they started killing each other. After all this killing, the Sumer, whatever, got conquered by... Oh, come on, they aren't even taking it seriously. This place is called Babylonian Empire. You know what? I'm skipping ahead. Oh, and now there's no characters I know. Of course. This guy's called Caesar. They're just ripping off New Vegas. Whatever, I'm skipping ahead again. Oh, okay. Now this makes more sense. War of the Bucket. Two cities go to war against each other because of a bucket. And underlying socio-political tensions. Who wrote this? Do they even know anything? I'm skipping ahead one last time. Steam what now? How did Steam make a game engine in their universe? I bet you Valve didn't consent to this. Oh, and now they're using heated water to make electricity. The writers clearly didn't do any research into how it really works. Ugh. I'm done. I just can't with this one. So I can't let it win. Let me put something together real quick. Alright, here it is. The real most complicated lore. It all begins in the beginning, when God 1 explodes into 12 other gods, and they each split into 15, and they all make and delete time and new realities. Let me skip forward a couple thousand pages. Oh, and we meet Bob, the eldritch being of friendship who commits tax evasion, and while doing so destroyed the 5 secret societies and their plan to resurrect Glimbo by killing kids. All this is happening in a country with politics or whatever. And it goes on for several million pages. But I feel like I made it clear who wins. As usual, it's me! Suck it, losers! Ha! That was not my best move. They shut down my charity for conflict of interest. But whatever, I give confusing lore a perfect background ADHD videos out of 10. Now like, subscribe, and info dump to your friends about this really cool YouTuber called Vinci.